The moment my sister smiled and slid that thick contract across the Easter dinner table, she thought she'd already won. "Just sign it," she said, pushing the papers until they stopped beside my plate. "We've already worked everything out." My mother folded her hands like she was delivering a blessing instead of a demand. "You owe your sister this," she said firmly. "After your divorce, she opened her home to you. It's time you repaid that kindness." Dad nodded without looking at me. Family takes care of family. The room fell silent. My aunt stared at her mashed potatoes. My cousins suddenly found the centerpiece fascinating. Nobody wanted to meet my eyes, because everyone knew exactly what they were asking. They wanted me to become my older sister's surrogate. Not because I had offered, not because I wanted to, because they had already decided my body belonged to the family. I picked up the contract. 43 pages. Lawyers, medical clauses, financial agreements. Everything had already been arranged. Everything except my consent. My sister leaned back confidently. "We knew you'd understand." I slowly flipped through every page while everyone watched impatiently. Then I reached one section. I smiled, pulled a pen from my purse, circled one sentence, wrote 6 words beneath it, then quietly slid the contract back. "I agree, provided Clause 12 is enforced exactly as written." My sister frowned. Mom grabbed the document. Dad leaned over her shoulder. Within seconds, their faces turned ghost white. The color disappeared so quickly my cousin actually whispered, "What happened?" Nobody answered, because they had just realized the contract they had prepared would destroy everything they had been hiding. That was their first mistake. 3 months earlier, I thought my divorce had been the worst thing that would ever happen to me. After 12 years of marriage, my husband left me for someone 10 years younger. The house was sold. Our savings were divided. My confidence disappeared overnight. When my older sister, Vanessa, offered me her guest room, I genuinely believed she was trying to help. "I've got plenty of space," she had said warmly. "You'll stay until you're back on your feet." I cried when she hugged me. I thought I'd been given another chance. I couldn't have been more wrong. At first, little comments slipped past me. "You should really help more around the house. It wouldn't hurt to contribute extra. You've got nowhere else to go." Every favor slowly became an obligation. Every meal became something I supposedly owed. Mom constantly reminded me, "Vanessa saved you." Dad agreed every single time. "You should be grateful." So I cleaned, cooked, watched their kids, ran errands, paid what little rent I could. Yet somehow, nothing was ever enough. Whenever family gathered, Vanessa loved telling everyone how much she'd sacrificed for me. I practically rescued her. Everyone nodded sympathetically. Nobody asked whether I had ever wanted rescuing, because that wasn't the story Vanessa wanted told. She needed to be the hero, and I needed to stay the burden. Remember that detail. It matters later. A few weeks later, Vanessa announced she and her husband Eric couldn't have children. There were tears, doctors, heartbreaking speeches. The family surrounded her with support. Then, the conversation slowly shifted toward me. Mom casually mentioned how healthy I was. Dad joked about keeping babies in the family. Vanessa laughed. I didn't. Something about the way they looked at me made my stomach tighten. Like they weren't discussing possibilities. They were discussing plans. Nobody in that room knew the truth. I wasn't the helpless younger sister they imagined. Years before my marriage, I'd built a successful legal consulting business, specializing in contract fraud and family estate disputes. When I married, I sold my public shares, stepped away from the spotlight, and quietly invested. Very quietly. After the divorce, I deliberately kept that part of my life hidden. Even my parents believed I'd lost almost everything. They never asked questions. They simply assumed. And people who make assumptions often reveal their true character. Vanessa's behavior became crueler. She criticized my clothes, my job, my appearance. "You should be thankful anyone still wants to help you." Eric rarely spoke. When he did, it was even worse. "You'd be doing something meaningful for once." I smiled politely. Inside, I was taking notes. Every conversation, every message, every demand. Legally, carefully, patiently. Then Easter arrived. The entire family gathered. The table looked beautiful. Fresh flowers, roasted lamb, homemade pies. A celebration. Until dessert. Mom cleared her throat. "We've discussed something important." My heartbeat slowed. Not because I was nervous, because I already knew. Vanessa reached into her designer handbag. The contract appeared, prepared weeks before. lawyer's letterhead, medical schedules, compensation, confidentiality clauses. She had planned every detail, except reading the fine print herself. She slid it toward me. "Sign it today." I looked around the room. Everyone waited. Nobody asked whether I wanted children of my own. Nobody wondered how pregnancy might affect my health. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was a solution. But the worst part was still ahead. As I read the agreement, Clause 12 caught my attention, buried deep inside, almost invisible. It stated that if any party had intentionally withheld material financial information while negotiating, the entire agreement would become legally void and subject to civil fraud penalties. Interesting, because I knew something. Vanessa and Eric had secretly applied for a massive trust distribution from our late grandmother's estate, one requiring sworn statements that every sibling had been treated equally and voluntarily. They had already filed those documents. I knew because I was one of the trustees, the hidden trustee. Grandmother had changed her will years ago after watching Vanessa manipulate relatives for money. She appointed me because she believed I was the only grandchild who couldn't be bullied. Nobody knew, not even my parents. I circled Clause 12. Then beneath it wrote, "I accept, provided every financial disclosure made to the Whitmore Family Trust is verified under oath." I handed it back. Silence. Mom read it first, then Dad, then Vanessa. Her smile vanished. Eric nearly dropped his wine glass. His hands actually started shaking, because they finally understood. If I signed, their own fraudulent trust application would immediately come under review. Everything they'd hidden, every lie, every forged declaration, would be exposed. This is where everything changed. Vanessa tried laughing. "What does that even mean?" I calmly reached into my purse, removed a sealed envelope, placed it beside the contract. Inside were certified trustee documents, grandmother's signed appointment, letters from attorneys, copies of their trust application, highlighted, every false statement, every omission, every signature. Gasps echoed around the dining room. My uncle removed his glasses. My aunt covered her mouth. Dad looked like someone had punched him. Mom whispered, "No." Vanessa's face completely drained of color. You're the trustee? I've been one for 7 years. You knew?" I knew everything. Dropped forks clattered onto plates. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. I looked directly at my sister. "You didn't invite me here because you loved me. You invited me because you believed I'd become desperate enough to surrender my body." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Then I turned toward my parents. "You didn't shelter me. I paid rent. I paid utilities. I bought groceries. I raised their children while they went on vacations. I have every bank transfer, every receipt, every message, every calendar entry." Silence. Absolute silence. That was their final mistake. Within weeks, the trust launched a formal investigation. Vanessa's application was rejected. The attempted misrepresentations triggered legal consequences. She lost access to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Eric resigned from his company after the investigation reached his employer. Their lawyer quietly withdrew. Several relatives stopped speaking to them entirely after learning how long they'd manipulated everyone. Mom called repeatedly, at first to argue, then to apologize, then simply to cry. Dad never defended the contract again. He couldn't. The evidence spoke louder than excuses. As for me, I moved into a beautiful home I'd quietly purchased months earlier, returned to expanding my consulting firm, started mentoring women escaping financially abusive relationships, because I understood exactly how manipulation begins. Not with screaming, with obligation disguised as love. Months later, another Easter arrived. This time I hosted dinner. Only people who respected boundaries received invitations. The table was smaller. The laughter was genuine. Nobody demanded sacrifices. Nobody treated gratitude as debt. And for the first time in years, home actually felt like home. Looking back, I don't hate my sister. Hatred gives people too much power. I simply learned that some people mistake kindness for weakness. They believe quiet people will never fight back, until the day they discover the quietest person in the room has been holding all the evidence. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea who they were dealing with? Tell me your story in the comments.